course, with most things in education that we know are beneficial, there are always barriers. It's important to acknowledge these barriers to make a plan to persevere despite them. So, what are some of the barriers to making connections with the families in your program? Time tends to be a big one, schedules of both teachers and parents. It's so complex when we think about teacher expectations. I know many of you have mentioned this throughout the course, and it is only getting more complex as more and more things are piled on teachers. And unfortunately, what can end up happening is some of the things that we know are the most important can get pushed to the side. And so it's important for us to acknowledge that. It's also important for us to acknowledge that parents have very busy schedules too, depending on what the professional lives are of the families, depending on their personal lives, if they are caring for an elderly parent, if they are caring for many, many children, if they have children with special needs, if they have any children with medical needs, if they have mental health struggles themselves, there are so many different things that can um, put a damper on the availability that parents might have when you might actually have the time to meet with them. Obviously, there are times where there might be differing schedule or differing perspectives. We'll go into that a little bit later when we're looking at parent development stages and different roles, which again we'll go into that when we talk about parent development. But it's important for us to acknowledge that that is the case. We are coming from different angles, and so we are going to have different perspectives, and we do have different roles. Our strength usually as teachers is working with the children, and it's helpful for us to be able to step back and know that and own that you most likely went into teaching because you love the age group that you work with. And as we mentioned in the last video, it wasn't likely because you loved working with parents or even realized at the time how much of this job would really involve working with parents. We are all parent educators as teachers, whether we want to be or have chosen to be or not. Another piece is differing language, culture, experiences, or values, and this can be one of the hardest barriers. Some schools have cultural liaisons to assist with this, but not all districts are big enough to rationalize that cost or to even find someone to fulfill that role. The reality is that sometimes what may seem like a cultural barrier or difference when it's not. It may be something else that's unrelated, and it's important for us to be able to be open with the family and be willing to ask questions if you're uncertain about something. And I've always found that asking questions if we're uncertain about something with a family ends up really opening the doors to a lot of things, as long as the question is being asked we're asking it for the right reasons. We're not asking questions um, to that we don't need to know. So for example, if we are working with a family and the we've only had contact with one of the parents, and the parent has referred to the other parent as their partner. We may wonder, is that partner the same sex as this parent that we have communication with, or is it a different sex? And we might be curious about that, but the reality is it doesn't really matter. However, what might matter is that partner the child's other parent? And what type of relationship, this part is probably even more important, what type of relationship does the child have with the partner. Has this child known the partner for a long time? If it's a new partner, um, then that's something that might be helpful for us to know in the class. So if we're noticing some behavioral changes in the child, we have a sense of, oh, this child might simply be adjusting to the fact that there's a new adult in this person's life. Um, but if we know that that partner is, no, this partner is the child's parent. This parent has been in the child's life since birth, or before that even. And so, just really stepping back to think about what we might be curious about some things, but do we need to know that information? And what, when we are curious about something, we feel like we need to know it. Why do we need it? How would it benefit us? And I think it's also really important to start from the basis that um, all parents want what's best for their children. And I know this has been brought up in class in the past, and if we can always start with that foundation when we're talking with parents, that will help. We don't want to be approaching parents in a way that they are going to get defensive, because then we know we're putting in a roadblock. When you think about some of the social emotional frameworks that we looked at a couple weeks ago, and conscious discipline talks about the the thinking brain. We want parents to stay in the thinking brain when we're talking with them, and not going to where the brainstem is functioning, where they're no longer really able to hear us. We want to be able to communicate in positive ways. And if it is a cultural question that you have, if you're wondering if it's a culture that does some fasting and you're wanting some more information about that, so you understand the impacts it might have on the child at school, those are fair questions to ask. And again, asking them kind of from a place of curiosity and not judgment. So you might want to test those. If you're nervous about some of those questions, test though asking them out with a trusted colleague, so that colleague can tell you, "God, that really sounds." It sounds somewhat like you're questioning or judging them, or wow, you really asked that question in an open-minded way. So keep that in mind. um, when we feel that language, culture, experiences, or values acts as a barrier to communication with parents, we have to remember that continuing to attempt communication, and by starting early, we can gain a better understanding of and possibly even appreciation for these differing viewpoints. And we want to have a variety of viewpoints, a variety of cultures within our programs. And these, if you're not someone who has been as open or comfortable with asking questions or communicating about differences or um, cultural aspects, it may feel bumpy to you in the beginning, but that is better than avoiding it altogether. And this is where it's super useful to reach out to trusted colleagues within your program or school, or even other schools that you have gotten to know through the years, of just how do they do that. I know both of actually one of the school districts that I teach at has been doing a lot of kind of on the side, since teachers aren't technically working this summer, on the side trainings on equity this summer, which has been very valuable. I hope it will be something that is required for all staff in the coming year, I should say. And then my other school district has put in a lot of phenomenal trainings the past couple of years that every single staff member has had. And um, so really kind of looking at what does your school district provide, and if you feel like it's not enough, to reach out and ask questions about that. We know we can all be better, and we want to know our families and the parents that we work with feel safe and respected, and feel feel that things are equitable within your program. And so this is a time, it always should be a time where we really step back and think, okay, just because this is how I view this situation doesn't mean that's exactly how this other person views it. And acknowledging the various backgrounds that we come to things with. So for example, if a parent comes to you with a concern that they feel their child of color was treated in an unequitable way in your classroom, you may feel like that wasn't the case at all. And that's okay for you to feel that way and believe that. However, we need to listen to that concern. We need to step back, do some self reflection, and look to see why does it appear that way to this family and this child. What could I have done differently to prevent that from happening, and what can I do going forward? And understanding that the family that brought the concern is not just dealing with this one particular incident, that they have likely and are likely kind of experiencing this kind of forever wondering, was this because of my race? Was this because of the color of my skin? And if you are not a person of color, you haven't had that experience. I haven't had that experience. I haven't ever wondered if somebody made a decision to not hire me or not be nice to me or whatever it is because of the color of my skin. I've never questioned that, where that is something that unfortunately people of color walk with, and it's not okay, and it's not that's something that we need to change, obviously, within our system, but we need to understand that is their lens and that is their perspective. And so, even if we don't see the situation that they might be saying we created, we need to listen and work with them on that, and um, perhaps even apologize, not necessarily that. Apologize that we're in this situation and that you want that to be better, and that was not your intention, but that you are acknowledging that you are stepping back and looking at how could that be different in the past. That is going to build trust more than you saying, no, this wasn't about race, this wasn't about the color of your child's skin, and pushing back on that, because that only makes the parent feel unheard. It makes the child feel unheard, and then there's a distrust there.